The road out of Horseshoe Bend is a ribbon with a temper. It hugs the Payette like it wants to apologize and then changes its mind. November makes the pines look like witnesses. The river keeps its opinions to itself. I was headed north in the painter's Buick. 2 doors, tired shocks, ladders lashed lazy to the roof rack because I kept telling myself I'd tie them properly tomorrow. The heater coughed like an old man, and the dashboard clock was wrong in a way that felt personal. I'd finished a kitchen in Cascade and underbid it by enough to make humility a line item. It was after midnight because jobs like mine run long when you're the kind of man who won't leave a streak in a corner. They were just past the bend, a man and a woman standing where the shoulder narrowed into dirt, lit by my high beams like 2 ideas. She held her elbows. He held nothing, which is its own kind of strategy. Thumb out, palm flat, an invitation that pretends it's a question. The Buick boats a little when you brake. The ladders did their tired clack. I pulled alongside because that's the person I had taught myself to be, the kind who thinks a small kindness can be an exorcism. Headed to Donnelly, the man said through my half-cracked window. His voice was polite without being friendly, hotel clerk at closing time. We'd be grateful for 10 miles. He had the face of a choir boy somebody forgot to supervise. Pretty, neat hair that tried, eyes that did not blink more than necessary. Clean denim, cuffs ironed to the idea of a man. The woman was smaller, coat too thin, hands folded like she was auditioning for warmth. She looked at me with a carefulness I've only ever seen in church and hospitals. If fear is a dialect, we were fluent in the same one. "Hop in," I said, because my mother raised me on casseroles and mutual aid, and it's a hard religion to renounce in a single night. "Don't slam it," I added, because the Buick had opinions about doors. He smiled like I'd passed a test I hadn't studied for. She slid into the back seat without looking. He took the front, the place of talkers. He smelled like wintergreen and motel soap, which is to say he smelled like someone else's idea of clean. I eased us back onto 55. The river shouldered us. The pines tipped their hats. The bridges arrived suddenly, like the state had planted them overnight. "Appreciate it," he said. "Been a long evening of not being anybody's business." "Know that one," I said. "I'm Calvin," he said. "This is Carrie." He offered the names like breath mints, fresh, disposable. I gave him mine because I didn't want to create a second script to memorize for later. "Work late?" he asked. His eyes did the quick scan of a man taking inventory. Paint under the nails, thermos on the seat, rag on the floorboard, hands that fix things for a living. "Kitchen in Cascade," I said. "Hard water. Tricks you into thinking you're done and then dries with its feelings hurt." He laughed, a genuine little spill of sound that made me like him against my better judgment. "Where you two coming from?" I asked. "Friends in Boise," he said. "Tried to make it on foot, but the hills have their own ideas after dark. River looks like it memorizes people who try to argue with it." "Plenty of pullouts," I said. "You see a car with hazard lights, that's usually a fisherman with a theory." He nodded. "You're a good man," he said, and there was something in it, a test balloon. "I'm a careful driver," I said. "We took the long curve the locals call Deadman on account of a story everyone tells badly. It's a lie. Most deaths are quiet stretches that don't want to be remembered." The woman in the back seat hadn't said a word. Her 57%. In the rear view, her face was a white coin, eyes fixed on the window like she was in love with trees. "You two heading home?" I asked, to make the night ordinary. "Home," he said, tasting the word. "What a luxury. We're between projects." He smiled again, softer. "Man like you probably has a place for all his tools, shelves with labels, jars with bolts that match the jars." "My jars are aspirational," I said. He tapped the dash with 2 fingers, like knocking on wood for luck. "Aspirations keep a man's hands busy," he said. "Idle hands buy maps." The wipers thumped the rhythm of a too-slow heart. I kept one eye on the fog that rises from river to road like a rumor. He let the quiet sit a minute, like he was waiting for it to cook through. Then he said, very mildly, "You worried about us?" "About hitting an elk," I said. "About the state forgetting to salt the bridge. About ladder rattle. You two are least of my list." "Kind of you," he said. "Kindness gets repaid in this world." He reached down, casual as reaching for a gum wrapper, and brought up a revolver from where his calf met the seat. He did not aim it. He held it like a coach holds a whistle, authority without exertion. "I'll pay you back with neatness," he said. My body went electric, then stupid. My first thought was my father's voice saying, "Keep your hands where men can see them, and they'll believe what you say." I put them at 10 and 2, and the Buick loved me for it. My second thought was the woman in the back seat still watching the glass like the trees were teaching a class she couldn't afford to miss. "No need for dramatics," I said. "I'm a cooperative man." "Good," he said. "I prefer cooperative. Saves everyone from becoming something they can't stop being later." He rested the revolver in his lap like a paperweight. "We're going to drive a ways. I'll tell you where to pull. Carrie doesn't like sudden moves." In the mirror, the woman still hadn't looked up. Her hands were clasped like a habit. I thought of the rumor you hear in bars about a trick where a partner plays harmless to keep your mind busy while the math gets done in the front seat. I thought of all the times I had let a woman's quiet make me soft and vowed to never again treat silence as innocence. "What do you want?" I asked, because men like him enjoy the courtesy of being asked. "Order," he said with a little delight, like I'd asked for his favorite subject. "A world where people do what they should, and the end of each night has its edges straight. You can help." He kept his eyes on the road like a man who loves keeping to a lane. He didn't need to point the gun. The idea of it made my bones obedient. "You ever shoot a man?" I asked. The question came from the part of me that has always preferred inventory to wishes. He thought about it as if giving me an honest answer would get us extra credit. "Yes," he said. "2. They were untidy people. Sloppy lights, sloppy talk, sloppy exit. I offered them neat. They refused. It's a kindness to make a road beautiful again." The way he said it turned the Payette white for a second. I felt the river swallow a story that had nothing to do with me. The Buick hummed the stubborn hymn of machines that want to last. He let us pass one pullout, then another, as if selecting a chair in a nearly empty room. The woman cleared her throat once, and the sound of it made me think of a little dog tied to a porch. "You thirsty?" he asked me, like a good host. "There's a thermos there." "Coffee's cold," I said. "Cold's honest," he said. "Coffee is coffee," I said, and reached slow because even thieves like to be humored. The thermos hissed like a story when I cracked it. I swallowed something that tasted like the color brown and told my heart to let it be fuel. "How far?" I asked. "Not far," he said. "Enough for you to believe in me." The night narrowed. The trees came in close like ushers at a funeral you attend, even though you didn't know the man. He made a small approving sound when the sign for Donnelly announced itself out of fog like a volunteer. "Next one," he said. "The barrow pit past the curve. You know it? Barrow pit, not ditch." The word landed too local on his tongue. It meant he knew this road, knew the peculiar vocabulary the state teaches boys. It meant this wasn't improvisation. It meant I was unlucky enough to meet a man rehearsing. I nodded, kept it small. The barrow pit after the curve is where the shoulder actually bites, dug for the day the road floods and the county has to pretend to care. The gravel is hungry, the weeds are gossip, the earth lurches down just enough to hold a car in place if it wants to be held. "You carry rope?" he asked, conversational. "Painter," I said. "I carry everything." "Good," he said. "I hate shopping at night." The revolver gleamed when the dash light pulsed a little brighter than it should, 3 times in a row, dying bulb. Then the bulb settled, like a man deciding to keep breathing. I flicked the blinker out of habit, and he laughed softly. "Signaling to God?" he asked. "Signaling to highway patrol," I said. "If he's napping 2 miles back, maybe he wakes up curious." "You believe in men who wake up curious?" he asked. "Optimist." I pictured the state police Crown Vic that eats miles for a living, its nose pointed at the middle distance, the man inside drinking old heat out of a foam cup. I pictured him. Then I pictured the alternative, the way a report sounds when it uses the word found. "Pull," he said. I did. I gave the Buick just enough wheel to look obedient and too much gas to be graceful. The front end slid. The ladder rack clattered like it had something to say. The rear came around half as much as I wanted, twice as much as I could control. We entered the barrow pit at an angle ugly enough to surprise even the ground. "Hey," he said mildly, not a shout, and the gun lifted an inch off his knee. "Sorry," I said. "Gravel." "Don't apologize to me," he said. apologized to the Buick. The car dipped one more inch, settled into the soft. The river hissed approval. I put it in park. I put both hands on the wheel again and pretended it was my mother's table when a guest prayed too long. Patient, but with limits. "We'll exit on your side," he said. "I need you to sit with me out there while I decide how much of you is worth keeping." "Do I get to vote?" I asked. He smiled. In his smile, I heard all the doors I'd ever hold for men who wouldn't hold them for me. "You're voting beautifully," he said. "Your hands are doing it for you." I breathed in what the river gives you at night, cold that tastes like coins. I turned the key halfway back. The heater stuttered out. Silence arrived and made itself comfortable. "Carrie," he said, still looking at me, "stay warm." "Yes," she said. A small word, the first I'd heard. The vowel trembled like a spoon on a counter. It was not the voice of a conspirator. It was the voice of a person who is practicing the art of not being chosen. "Okay," he said to me and opened his door. I did not move. "You're helpful," he said, noticing. "Don't let that sabotage you." "I'm thinking," I said. "About?" He stepped out. The revolver stayed relaxed, the way a rope is relaxed on a dock when the boat is tied tight enough. "Whether I'm the sort of man who can live with being helpful tonight," I said. "Everyone is," he said, standing now in the high beams, a tall geometry, rain starting in the kind of light Idaho calls weather. That's what makes order possible. He rounded the hood, slow, courteous, like men do when they want you to believe their rules will keep you alive. He opened my door with 2 fingers so as not to alarm it. He offered a hand palm up, a gentleman inviting a lady to dance. The revolver hung at his side. The barrel's black, a little too calm. "That's the thing about order," I said. "It doesn't always pick the right foreman." "Maybe tonight it did," he said, and smiled kindly, which is a dangerous way to arrange a face. I stood. The gravel told my boots my weight. The air put its hands on my shoulders like a coach. The barrow pit sloped down into the dark, where cattails whisper whether you're worth the trouble. "Walk," he said. I walked. He did not touch me. He let the gun draw the line around my body. We moved to the edge where the ditch holds last summer's tall grass, flat like something already slept there. The road hissed above us when a truck went by in a hurry to be something else. The woman in the back seat was a small moon in the window. 2 eyes, no sentences. "Name?" he asked. He knew it. He wanted me to say it to the river so the water could learn a new recipe. I said it. I felt it leave and keep some of me with it. I understand now why people go by nicknames in bars. There are nights when you need a body double. "Here's what happens," he said, conversational, crossing one ankle over the other as if waiting for a bus. "You listen to me, and I see you as a solved problem. Solved problems go easy. I've had people who insist on improvisation. Improvisers make messes. They make me correct them. Do you like being corrected?" "No," I said. "Then you'll be neat," he said. "You'll be a detail in a story with boundaries." "You've done this before," I said, because he wanted me to notice, and I wanted him to say it. He considered whether telling the truth would help. "I do order often," he said finally, "and I like it better than I like music." He motioned with the revolver, a small conductor's twitch. I stepped where he told me to. The tall grass hissed at my shins like a teacher. I felt the ground give a little under my heel and knew if I went another 3 feet, I'd be in the part of the ditch where the county forgets to mow until June. You can drown in 3 inches if you pick the wrong inches. "Hands," he said. "The word is a lever." "You got rope," I said. "Rope is a choice." He smiled. "You notice," he said. "Good, you will have a better life because of noticing, if you get one." He had me facing the river, his left behind me, the revolver angled at the little hollow between my ribs where an easy night could live if you let it. I could smell wintergreen again, and underneath it the dull iron of oil warmed just enough to have an opinion. He reached into the coat I'd thrown on the back seat earlier and came up with my own roll of painter's cord. Orange, thin, optimistic. He held it up like a magician, showing the audience the rabbit before he asks if anyone knows its mother's maiden name. "You bring your own ceremony," he said, pleased. "We love a guest who arrives prepared." "Cord won't hold," I said. "Sheer force. It'll bite, then break." "You're thinking of knots as verbs," he said. "I think of them as nouns." "Untie me later so you can remember how neat you were," I said. talking because the body will burn language to keep warm. You like that part. He stepped close to thread the first loop around one wrist. His fingers were careful. He did not shake. He used a surgeon's economy and a housewife's satisfaction. He reached for my second wrist, and that is where my life found the first hinge. I gave him my right hand obediently. I also pushed my left wrist forward just enough that the loop he had set slid off the heel of my hand and dropped to the ground like a decision. He saw it. He tsked softly, not angry, disappointed. "You'll make me do it twice," he said. "I hate repeats." "I hate parlor tricks," I said, and bent to pick it up, palms open, showing him I was helpful, showing him the thin orange line of cord cranes my wrists already wore from ladders. "Stop," he said. I did as I was told. He repositioned, brought the revolver back to where the instructions live, tired of my suggestions. He took my left wrist again, louder this time. He tied quickly. He did not cinch, he did not test. He trusted his own hands. The neat thing about neat men is they think the world behaves to avoid embarrassing them. "Okay," he said, "turn back." The coyotes swallowed a laugh out somewhere on the far side of the river. A truck downshifted a mile up like a reminder that the country goes on disinterested, even when you are becoming a story against your will. I turned. He stepped in front of me slightly, the angle perfect for a descent, for a push, for a nudge into water that would blame Idaho for being cold in November. "Tell me something true," he said. "I like to leave with a souvenir for my head." I gave him the truest thing I own. I put myself in places where people can find me. He blinked, his almost pretty eyes doing the smallest click. His mouth made a thoughtful shape. That pause was all the world owes you most nights. "I mean it," I said. "I'm late when I say I'll be on time. I don't go quiet. I owe men money I worked for them to earn, and they will come looking. I'll be missed before the coffee cools. If I don't show tomorrow, you won't get the quiet you love. You'll get attention." He considered attention like a man considers a coat he doesn't want to have to buy. "You're lying," he said, not convinced, more like he wished it. "I'm bad at lying," I said. "Ask any woman I've ever apologized to. Ask my foreman. Ask the pastor who keeps telling me I'm late to be the person he wants me to be." He smiled a little despite himself. "You're funny," he said. "I am," I said. "You like neat. You like order. Attention is not neat. Let me be an untidy variable you don't have to balance tonight." He thought again, head tipped like he was listening to a song in a room I couldn't hear. The woman in the back seat was still a moon. The river kept concealing everyone's worst work. He nudged the revolver against my ribs very gently, as if consoling a child who doesn't like shots. "I will think about it," he said, and took half a breath, like he might be the kind of man who allows his own sense to talk to him for once in his life. That's when the Buick horn sobbed. Not a blast, not a warning, a small wounded animal of a sound, a hand on the wheel. Any hand, her hand. He turned his head toward the car with an expression so surprised it almost made me love him for being briefly human. I brought my bound wrists up and forward and hit him in the mouth with all the clumsy mercy I had. He stumbled back a half step, indignation more than pain. The revolver wobbled, and in that wobble, the night earned me a year. I ran. Running downhill in a barrow pit is a bad idea, but I have had worse. The grass whipped, the ditch grabbed, the river licked the toe of my boot and asked for the rest of me like a second helping. I chose the brush instead, the thick place where the cattails do their chore, and the blackberry canes remember who wronged them. "Stop," he said, even then, even with adrenaline on his tongue, saying it like a librarian to a boy who moves a chair too loud. I did not. "Calvin," he called, using his own bedtime voice. "Be a gentleman." "You first," I said, and hit the slick place where the ditch becomes a small diplomatic puddle. I went to one knee, the cord bit, my palms filled with gravel like a tithe. I stood. I moved. The pistol reported once, twice, flat cracks that made Idaho turn its head, but not its conscience. The shots weren't at me. Not exactly. Warning. Punctuation. He did not want mess. The sound of failure is messy. He hates it. I hit the uphill shoulder on the far side like a man who intends to be someone else tomorrow. The boots found purchase. The barrow pit let go. The asphalt kissed my knees and kneecaps argued with me about loyalty. I got to my feet. I ran the road. There is no dignified running in work boots with your wrists tied. There is only refusing to fall in the direction gravity prefers. Headlights appeared around the curve, a two-lamp face that could be salvation or the reason he gets to finish what he started. I lifted my bound hands as high as a man can and made an idiot semaphore in the middle of the state's business. The truck, the good kind, the kind with a badge in its glove box, even if it isn't on the door, braked the way a heart does when it sees a body it might have to decide about. "Hey," the driver said out the window, human first, authority second. "You all right?" "No," I said in what must have been a novel tone, because the door opened before the truck had stopped moving. Behind me came the sound of a polite man recovering his plan. "Don't," he said, his word traveling on the river air like a notice from a landlord. The driver stood between us without calculating whether he was allowed to be brave yet. He looked at my wrists. He looked at the barrow pit. He looked at the Buick with the small woman in the rear window and put himself on my side like it was the last thing he would do if the math went wrong. "Hands," he said to me, and I lifted them. He took a pocket knife the size of honesty and sawed the orange cord that I will not use on ladders anymore. The fiber heated then gave, the way bad habits do. My hands came back to me and started to remember who they were. "Sir," the driver said to the man in the ditch, finding his badge behind his voice now, "you put that weapon down." The man considered so fast it looked like stillness. Then he turned not to the driver, not to me, but to the river, and the night, and the parts of Idaho that keep secrets because they think it's charity. He lowered the revolver. He raised his hands into a pose that would read as compliant in any courtroom. He smiled, and it was beautiful in the way rotten things are beautiful when they wear suits. "I was preventing a theft," he said softly. He picked us up, then tried to. "Save it," the driver said, which is a sentence I needed someone else to say for me. He looked at me. "You want to press charges right this second, or you want to be alive in the morning and figure the paperwork after breakfast?" "Breakfast," I said. "Please." The driver did not look away from the man with the neat hair. He did not put his hand on his holster, because men like him know that moving that hand before you need to is an invitation to what you can't return. He made a tiny beeping sound with his head, the kind you make when you call another car into your life. The road disagreed and accepted it. Someone called someone. Someone came. Someone said my name with the tonic stress on the first syllable, the way my mother does when she's found me asleep on the couch with the TV talking nonsense. Someone cut the rest of the cord off my left wrist and put it in a little plastic bag that may still exist somewhere in a drawer with other ugly ribbons of other people's nights. Someone said statement, and later, and water, and sit. I sat. The Buick sat. The river made its endless liturgy. The man with the revolver did what neat men do when the plot changes. He obeyed just enough to make you doubt yourself. He told a story that sounded like law when you whispered it. He took a breath the size of Idaho. He smiled and asked the night to write him as a person who had tried to help. The woman in the back seat finally spoke a second word. She said my name, not his, not the driver's, mine, and she said it like prayer beads. I turned. She had her hands in her lap, like mine had been, and there were no marks on them that the flashlight could see, but her shoulders were wearing a weight the county hasn't taxed yet. "Come here," the driver said to her, gentle, like she was a deer that hadn't decided what she thinks of roads. She did. She exited the Buick like she'd been practicing it in her head for an hour. She walked like the ground might charge rent. She came to stand next to me, and for the first time her eyes stopped being windows and became hands. She reached and took my elbow like she wanted me to know I hadn't imagined the horn. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be," I said. "You moved the part of the world you could move." A second truck arrived, then a third. The world gathers for men with guns faster than it gathers for men with stories. He stopped smiling when the third light pinned him the way we had been pinned, and he looked very much less like a choir boy and very much more like what you are when you think you're the only one allowed to write endings. They took him into a different night than mine. My night included a warm blanket and a bad cup of coffee and 6 sentences repeated 3 times to men who preferred nouns to adjectives. Revolver, barrow pit, Highway 55, couple, horn, cord. I didn't sleep. The part of me that does sleep had a meeting without me and decided to resign. The morning made Idaho look like it had politely forgotten the night. The river was the same water, rearranged. The state trooper who had cut my wrists free had a different face in the daylight, a little softer, a little older, like honesty left fingerprints. He poured me fresh coffee that tasted like a compromise and asked me again for the shape of the gun. Revolver, I said. Blacker than opinion, the kind a careful man would clean after he makes the news, even if he doesn't have to. Serial number filed? He asked. I was busy noticing the part pointed at me, I said, and he acknowledged the fairness with a nod. A detective with a stiff hat asked me to walk him through the distances, from the pickup to the curve, from the curve to the pullout, from the pullout to the place where mud had an opinion, from that place to where the woman said my name like a grave. We drove the stretch together at noon. Everything ugly made handsome by sun. The barrow pit looked like it would never hurt anybody. The cattails edited themselves into decor. The tread marks looked like geometry homework. "This is your rope?" the detective asked, holding the orange cord up with 2 fingers, like he was trying not to contaminate the idea of it with his fingerprints. "Painters," I said. "Bought it at the Ace because it was on sale, and I was pretending that savings on cord could be savings on grief." He wrote painter's cord in a neat hand. He wrote horn. He wrote woman in back, unclear relationship, and then crossed out unclear and wrote instrumental and underlined it, which is how I learned there is a grammar for rescue. "You believe them?" I asked, because our transaction felt incomplete without me paying with a question. "I believe what I can use," he said. "I believe you were lucky enough to be loud. I believe some men prefer neat and some prefer fast, and last night you got a man who wanted neat and was interrupted. If you'd gotten a fast one, I'd be looking for you with dogs right now." "Neat," I said, tasting how small that word is for what he meant. He looked at the water, the part of the ditch that didn't care about our vocabulary. "There are people we didn't find fast enough," he said. "Not a sermon, just a man reading a ledger with math that won't balance." He asked about the woman. "Did she speak to you before the horn?" "No." "After?" "Apologized." "For what?" "For being the kind of person who knows how to live under polite rules until there's a horn," I said. And he didn't write that down because some sentences are for rooms that aren't made of paper. He told me they had him. He told me his name, and I said it out loud because names are a way to keep the world flat when it wants to buckle. He told me there had been other nights like mine, different endings. He told me there were whispers in dispatch rooms about a claim of 42 that wasn't being printed because there's a line between information and advertising. He told me they might call me for something with wood paneling and a room that smells like microphones. He told me I could say no. "I never say no enough," I said. "You're learning," he said. I went home and put my hands in hot water as if apology could be absorbed through skin. The cords had left red parentheses on my wrists. My body kept the sentence inside them. I ate eggs with my fingers because knives felt like an affectation. I called my foreman and told him I wouldn't be in. He said good in a voice that sounded like a person who had decided to live long enough to feel feelings later. The phone rang before I was done, being the kind of man who rinses his plate immediately. A woman whose job it is to remember the worst parts of a state's memory asked if I could sit with her for an hour and convert my night into lines on a form that makes sense to people who weren't there. I went because I didn't want Neat to win without me standing in front of it one more time. "Tell me about his words," she said. "Men like this arrange adjectives around themselves like fences. What did he call things?" "Order," I said. "Neat, solved, helpful, corrected. He said before a lot." "What did he call you?" she asked. "Good," I said. "Polite, helpful, gentleman. He used we once like a thief uses ours." "What did he call her?" "Carrie," I said. "He introduced her like she made him legal." "Do you think it's her name?" she asked. "No," I said, and the certainty made me a little ill. It wasn't his either. We read through old paper. She pointed to incidents that smelled like mine. A gas station off I-84, where a man with a careful smile offered a ride to a kid who thought kindness was still a reasonable investment. a turnout where a painter's tape was found without the painter, a culvert that had more story than water. Not all hers. This state shares its ugliness with neighbors like a bad casserole. What happens to him? I asked before I remembered not to ask questions I don't want answered. We try him on what we can prove, she said. We keep him where he can't arrange other people. We don't get to win all the way. We try to keep him small. Small, I said, thinking of his hands and his calm, and whether he'd ever been small a day in his life. There was a hearing. There were men in suits who talk more carefully than anybody else and pretend it's because of ethics. There was my voice describing a river, and a car, and a barrow pit, and a horn, and the sound a zip-cut cord makes when it decides to forgive you for buying it. There was his face looking too handsome for its contents. There was the woman, Carrie for the night, whatever her name is for the rest of her life, sitting 2 rows back with a sweater that did not match her eyes. And every time I paused for breath, she remembered to breathe too. They asked me if I could identify the revolver. I said I could identify the feeling of it and let them translate that into whatever shape the law requires. They asked if I was sure about the words I'd put in his mouth. I said I heard them in Idaho and in my hands, and in the way I haven't slept since. And that is the kind of certainty that doesn't look good in a transcript, but matters in a kitchen at 2 a.m. He didn't look at me the way some men do, the intimate threat of eye contact intended to rent space in your life. He looked at the judge, and then at the ceiling, and then at his own hands, like he owed them a better story than the one they'd written. When they read the names of 2 men he'd already been proven to have shot in the head, in this county, on this road, I watched the room let itself believe in monsters without needing fangs. The papers said self-confessed serial killer in fonts that must cost extra. The radio said longest-serving death row like, that's a merit badge a state should wear. The television said botched attempt, later, much later, when the state tried to be neat about ending him, and discovered neat is not in its gift either. I learned that on a morning when my hands were full of paint thinner, and the announcer's voice cut through with words like IV line and halted and gurney, and my coffee tasted like a sermon about competence. I stood in my kitchen and said good out loud, not because I wanted him to live, not because I wanted him to die, but because I like when the world can't make itself tidy on a schedule. The woman, whatever her name really is, sent me a note once. On a card with a picture of a river that isn't the Payette, by a hand that trembled only on the first letter, she wrote, I remember your face when you ran. It looked like mine feels. Thank you for being the right audience when I found my horn. I put the card with the others that marked time in my life, the bills I paid late, and the ticket from the first time I drove through a yellow light because my hands shook and traffic is a suggestion some nights. I got back in a car after 2 weeks of not. The Buick had a scar on the bumper, the shape of decision. I left the orange cord in a drawer and bought rope that could hold a man without hurting him because I needed to make the world safer in some small way, even if that way was ridiculous. I drove the same road. I stared at the same river. I did not pick up the couple I saw at the shoulder near the mile marker where the trees lean in like gossip. I pulled into the pullout and gave them the painter's lunch I hadn't eaten instead. I said there's a storm coming, even though there wasn't. I said don't go to the barrow pits, even though everyone knows and no one remembers. The trooper called me 6 months later, not to ask for more, just to tell me a thing that counts. We tied him to a dead man in California from '74, he said. They closed a case because he breathed too loud when he shouldn't. He didn't have to tell me. He told me because men like him have to choose between cynicism and community daily. We hung up and I put my hands flat on my kitchen table and cried into the knots in the wood for exactly 20 seconds so I wouldn't get addicted to it. On good days, the road is a friend who minds his business. On bad days, the river says, I'll keep what you bring me. Most days are in the middle, which is where men like me live, between pull-out and home, between neatness and whatever else mercy looks like when it's carried out of a barrow pit by a stranger in a truck. I measure my life now in small policies. I fuel up before dark. I keep a hand towel over the dash so the horn doesn't surprise me unless I ask it to. I do not take kindness out of my driver's side door and hand it to a stranger unless I am willing to watch it walk away forever. I carry 2 flashlights, one for seeing, one for being seen. I let my sister know when I leave a job site and when I arrive back at a town with a diner still open. I do not apologize for crossing the street to stand under fluorescent lights in a gas station where the coffee tastes like a lecture. I do pickups, still, ladders, not people. I see couples at the shoulder, and my foot grows heavy in a way that makes me ashamed of the man I used to be and proud of the one who got home. I hand food out of windows and keep tools in my trunk I can afford to watch leave. I promise myself the same mercy I offer strangers, the right to be unhelpful when helpfulness would feed a mouth that is not mine. Sometimes I go to the river in daylight like a man who wants to repair a marriage with geography. I stand on the bank below the place the barrow pit sickens, and I watch the current rehearse its alibis. It doesn't owe me anything. It took nothing from me except my confidence, and perhaps that was overdue. I tell it names out loud. The 2 men whose deaths are no longer rumors but remembered now in records, Edward Thomas Arnold and John Wayne Bradford, and I say I'm sorry for not knowing their stories before I had to. I say I am sorry for meeting their murderer as a stranger and walking away at all. I say their names because I want to be a man who tells the truth about the state that keeps me. Someone sent me a clipping about a thing that happened in February, years after my worst night. I hold the paper sometimes, not because the details matter, you can drown in other people's paperwork, but because the state tried to end him and botched it, and the only use I have for that fact is this. Neatness is not a right, not for him, not for me. I do not get a clean cut. He does not get a clean finish. We get the middle. We get the smudges. We get to keep living where the rules are bent long enough for someone to run uphill in work boots with their wrists tied. I think of the woman who learned the horn. I try not to put a story on her life she doesn't want. In my best imagining, she is somewhere cold with a hot drink and a husband who knows how to make quiet not feel like a threat. In my worst imagining, she is in a room with a mirror, unlearning her name. Reality is probably between those, a small apartment with a plant that refuses to die, and the kind of job where she is allowed to say no to men who ask for neatness. I sent her a Christmas card with a picture of snow on pine boughs because Idaho sells those at the post office by the register. She didn't answer. That's fine. You don't owe the rest of your life to the people you saved and were saved by. Every man I know thinks he would have fought and won. I let them think it. I don't tell them I offered my wrists because I needed the rope. I don't tell them I tried to sound like a man other men would want to protect. I don't tell them the truth, that the most heroic thing I did was say words in a row until help had time to make a plan. I don't say I learned to love a horn. If bravery had a face that night, it was a small woman's hand looking for a circle to press. I keep painting kitchens. It contains me. The corners get straight. The gloss sets. The lines obey. I can make a room tell the truth about itself when light hits it. I can leave and a family comes home and says clean, and they mean it in a way that isn't a threat. I like that. I like being the reason a boundary behaves. Men like him do not own boundaries anymore in my life. He tried to make me a solved problem. I refuse to live solved. I am not brave. I am not quick. I am not the kind of man who doesn't pull over when a woman hugs her elbows on a highway shoulder. I am the kind of man who survives with ugly math. I am the kind of man who practiced no like it was a hymn, and then learned to sing the harmony for help. When the road goes quiet after midnight and the river thinks it's alone with its past, I talk to whatever part of Idaho listens, and I make my small policies out loud. If you smell wintergreen, keep both hands where the world can see them, but do not give your wrists. If a man asks for your name before he's earned it, charge admission. If a couple stands in your beams, hand them a sandwich and keep your car in gear. If someone says order, ask him to whom he plans to mail it. If you hear a horn and it isn't yours, make it yours. If you put kindness on the table, take your share back with interest. And if the river asks for you, tell it no politely and go home to write your name on something that needs it. Receipt, wooden handle, kitchen wall where a family will keep their calendar. Leave yourself in places where people can find you. It's not neat. It is mine. How am I doing now? Well, I keep a spare blade in the truck. I text the mile marker when I pass Deadman, and I only pull over where the road has witnesses and the river can't pretend it didn't see. Killer reveal. Thomas Eugene Creech. Thomas Eugene Creech, born 1950, is a self-confessed serial killer linked to murders across multiple states. In Idaho, he was convicted for the 1974 Highway 55 double murder of house painters Edward Thomas Arnold and John Wayne Bradford, shot and left in a barrow pit near Donnelly, and later, while imprisoned, he murdered fellow inmate David Dale Jensen in 1981, returning him to death row. Creech has 5 murder convictions, Idaho, Oregon, California, and has claimed up to 42 killings, many uncorroborated. Investigators in 2024 also tied him to the 1974 San Bernardino County killing of Daniel A. Walker. Idaho scheduled his execution for February 28, 2024, but it was halted when staff couldn't establish an IV line. A federal judge later stayed a second attempt in November 2024. As of 2025, he remains on Idaho's death row.